Welcome to Daily Armour. Our verse today will be found in the book of Joshua, chapter number 2, and we're looking at several verses, but I want to use for our main verse today, verse number 11. Joshua chapter number 2 and verse number 11, and it says, "And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and in earth beneath." Now, yesterday I spoke about Lydia, about how the Lord told Paul to go to Macedonia. Paul had wanted to go to some other areas, and then through a vision of the Lord, he is led to go to Macedonia. The leadership of the Holy Spirit led him to Macedonia, and there he went to down to the river where the women were praying and gathered, and he preached, and they received the Lord, and specifically spoke of the woman named Lydia, who we found out through the description of her was a businesswoman who feared the Lord, but she needed Jesus. She needed Jesus. So religion can only take us so far. And we're going to be speaking about another woman today, a little bit different line of work. We're talking about Rahab the harlot. And she had a home there in Jericho. It was along the wall. And if you know anything about the story of the fall of Jericho, that the Joshua sent out 2 spies to spy out the land, to spy out the area. And so they went into the city, and they went into the home of Rahab. And she ended up hiding them there. And she did that because of what she had heard. If you really look at verse number 11, it says, "And as soon as we had heard these things," what did they hear about? Well, she's going to tell us. And then we've got scripture that we can refer to back at what they done. If you look up at verse number 10, it says, "For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you, when ye came out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed." So they had already been hearing about them. And this was a very far distance. They had crossed the Jordan River by this time. So not only had they come from Egypt, the Lord parted the Red Sea, and they had to deal with some conflict before they ever even crossed Jordan, and the Lord brought them the victory through King Sihon and through King Og. They were utterly destroyed. Now, these are not just anybody. These are massively feared kings. It's just unheard of to think that you could defeat King Sihon and King Og. They were mighty kings. When the spies were sent out originally to spy out the land, they came across this land that was full of giants. These were very strong, big, huge, massively full of conflict. The people that they saw, they were quite a sight to behold, and many from way out had heard of them and would have feared them. So that's when they're thinking about what they're hearing, and not only the Red Sea did it part for them, and that the Egyptians were destroyed behind them, which was a great army and a country to be feared. But not only that, but then on the other side, that also Sihon and Og were destroyed as well. So, and it reminds you again what it says in verse number 11, "And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt." Our hearts did melt. She is speaking on behalf of the whole town of Jericho. The whole city of Jericho did melt. But also she's speaking of their hearts, but she's also speaking of her own heart. Of her own heart. "Neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you." And I love her description of their Lord, who she heard about, and who she believed that they could be destroyed, she believed that there's no one stronger than their Lord. It says, for the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. She heard about their Lord. She heard about their God. Not just the people of Israel. It wasn't them, but it's what their God did for them. It's what he does for us. It's what Jesus does for us. It's not us, but it's what the Lord does for us and with us, and how he chooses to use us. And when others hear about things that he's done in my life and in your life, then that's what makes the difference. We can't make the difference outside of just being obedient to the Lord and just following him like the Israelites were doing. And they didn't always do it perfectly, and we don't always do it perfectly. I mess up all the time. But when we really put ourselves out there and let the Lord give the victory, then others hear about it. And when others hear about it, they'll turn to him as well. I want you to turn in your Bible to the book of Hebrews. I want you to see what it says in the New Testament about Rahab. If you'll go to Hebrews chapter 11 and look at verse 31. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 31, it says, by faith the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace. By faith. She had full faith in the God of the Israelites, in the Lord, by faith. By what she had heard, she put her faith in him. By what she heard. Just like the religious woman Lydia, the woman who was probably a wonderful woman, a smart woman, a religious woman. It said she feared the Lord. She was down at the river praying. But she had to do the same thing. She had to believe God. And God had Jesus come and be that Redeemer for me and for you. And so by faith as well, it was the same faith. Lydia was told about Jesus, who she had never met. Rahab was told about the Lord, who she had never met. So both following the Lord by faith. The same way. Salvation, the same way. It's by faith. Through the Redeemer. Through the Lord himself. He is my Redeemer. And if you're saved, he's your Redeemer. And it's through him. And when others hear, then they can believe as well. And they can put their faith, by faith, put their faith and trust in him. So as we look at the life of Rahab, I want to look at it a little bit more. I want to, in case there's some of you who haven't heard, who don't know the specific chapter in Joshua chapter 2. Maybe you've heard Rahab being spoke of, but maybe you've never read it for yourself. Let's start, let's back up and to chapter number 2, but verse number 1. Let's just start at the very beginning of Joshua sending out the spies to spy out Jericho. And it says, and Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, go view the land, even Jericho. And they went and came into a harlot's house named Rahab and lodged there. So they were able to stay with her. And as you'll learn, she ended up hiding them from the locals. So verse number 2 says, and it was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country. So these are 2 men whom they were fearing. They had heard about the Israelites, and they have recognized that there's these 2 strangers that have came into Rahab's house. We saw they were seen going in. And, they're worried. It says, verse number 3, and the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country. And the woman took the 2 men and hid them, and said thus, there came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. And it came to pass about the time of shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. So she fabricates a story where she says, well, when it got dark, about the time when the gate was going to get shut, they left. and I don't know where they went, but if you hurry, you can go find them. And so she is completely turning against her heritage, against her own country, because she believes in the God of Israel, and in verse number 4 it says, or let me move on. Verse number 6, but she had brought them up to the roof of the house and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan. They would have searched her home. They wouldn't have just believed what a harlot had to say. They had been viewed coming in, so they would have searched her home. And so she hid them. And so while they were being hid, they were hid very well. And during the search, they were not found. And so they left. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan unto the fords. And as soon as they which pursued after them were gone out, they shut the gate. So they went out of the gate, shut the gate behind them because they didn't want anybody coming in. They had, the Israelites had already been spotted. And so now they've got the gate, and knowingly they've got them shut inside. And before they were laid down, she came up unto them upon the roof, and she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. She said, I know the Lord. She has faith that the Lord was going to take over this area, that he had said this was going to be unto the Israelites, and she had faith in that. She was just succumbing to that. She was submitting to that. And she was putting her life on the line in that submission. These two men, she was at the mercy of these two spies. And she says, for we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did unto the two kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. And I love this again, verse number 11 again, our main verse again. And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt. Her heart melted. She's not just describing the people as a whole, but she's describing herself. Our hearts did melt. Neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. This was a woman who, she didn't make the greatest of a living, but she did own her home. She had a home. She ran a business, even though it was not a respectable business. And because of the business that she did, she was probably used to having to be very savvy, be very clever, be very careful. She was probably a very street smart kind of a woman. Because of the line of business that she was in. So she would not be fooled by imposters. She was not one that was going to be fooled, but she heard about the God of the Israelites, and she believed by faith. She believed. And she said this about him, for the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. She knew that the God they served was in charge of everything above and was in charge of everything below. Now therefore I pray you, swear unto me by the Lord, since I have showed you kindness, that ye will also show kindness unto my father's house, and give me a true token. So she wanted to help them, but in turn she also was helping herself. And she wasn't just thinking of herself, she was also thinking of her family. Now, being the kind of living that she made, more than likely, this family did not live with her. She was speaking about parents that lived in their own home. She was speaking about brothers and sisters and families that had lived in their own homes. And this is what I want you to notice. The man said, verse number 13, and that ye will save alive my father and my mother and my brethren and my sisters and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. So here you've got all these families that she is thinking about. And verse number 14, the men answered her, our lives for yours. If ye utter not this our business, it shall be, when the Lord hath given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with thee. Verse 15, then she let them down by a cord through the window, for her house was upon the town wall, and she dwelt upon the wall. See, this is her house. It's upon the it's on the outside. She had a window leading to the outside of the wall. It says, and she dwelt upon the wall. Verse 16, and she said unto them, get ye to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you, and hide yourself there 3 days, and until the pursuers be returned, and afterward may ye go your way. She's saying, go on out to the outskirts. Wait there for about 3 days. She knew how far they would go. She knew about how long it would take for the men that were pursuing them, the men that she had sent on this, this journey. She knew about how long it would take them and about how long it would be for them to be back. And she told them to wait there. The men said unto her in verse number 17, we will be blameless of this thine oath which thou hast made us swear. This is verse 18. This is the family that she's thinking about, not just herself, but she's thinking about her parents, her brothers, her sisters. Verse 18, behold, when we come into the land, thou shalt bind this line of scarlet thread in the window which thou didst let us down by. So this scarlet rope is how she let them down out of the window. And he says, and thou shalt bring thy father and thy mother and thy brethren and all thy father's household home unto thee. They're telling her, these two spies are telling her, you go get everybody and you bring them to your house. They have to come to your house. They have to believe what you're telling them about our God. They have to believe enough to want to find shelter in the harlot's house. And maybe she wasn't the most popular sister. Maybe she wasn't the favorite child. I doubt that she probably was. But she was still one that had a love for her family, even if they didn't love or respect her, and because of what she did for a living. But something was different about her. Something was changed about her. But they had to come to her home. And I would say that there was many more willing to come than maybe that weren't so willing to come, because they would have seen a difference in her. They would have seen a change in her. She's changed. She's different. Her faith is in the God of the Israelites. And it came to be that whosoever shall go out the doors of the house into the streets, his blood be upon his head. See, that's where the spies are saying, if there's any of your family that refuse to stay in your home, that they're on their own, can't be responsible for their lives. Those that stay in your home, those that stay with you in your home, who's going to be safe. And it says, we will be guiltless, and whosoever shall be with thee in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if any hand be upon him. They're saying, those will be safe that are in your house. And if thou thus utter this our business, then we will be quit of thine oath which thou hast made us to swear. So you don't always know if what somebody's telling you is the truth. You have to put your faith in the Lord. He knows best. He knows best. Verse number 21 says, and she said, according unto your word, so be it. And she went them away, and they departed. And she bound the scarlet line in the window. She put that scarlet line in the window. I love how it's a scarlet line. It's red. It's red like the blood. And she put it in the window. It was visible. And they went and came unto the mountain and abode there 3 days, until the pursuers were returned, and the pursuers sought them throughout all the way, but found them not. They were safe because Rahab was used of the Lord to keep them safe and get them back. And we see, if you'll skip on over, if we want to see how it happened, if you'll skip on over to the fall of Jericho, it happens in Joshua chapter number 5. And I want you to notice, really, if we go on to chapter number 6, and it says, now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, none came in. They had those walls, those gates. They knew those men were out there, and they knew there was more out there to come. And they shut those gates. And they tried to prevent anyone from leaving, anyone from coming in. They were hoping they were safe within the walls, but they weren't. And if you know anything about what happened, the Lord has them march around Jericho for 6 days. And on the seventh day, they shout. The priests blow the trumpet, they shout, and the walls come down. The walls, except for Rahab. Rahab's family was safe. If you'll skip down in chapter number 6, I want you to notice that. Verse number 22 says, But Joshua had said unto the two men that had spied out the country, Go into the harlot's house, and bring out thence the woman and all that she hath, as ye swear unto her. He said, her whole family, go get them out, because we're going to go by what covenant that you made, what you swore to. We're going to heed to that. And it says, verse 23, And the young men that were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brethren and all that she had. And they brought out all her kindred and left them without the camp of Israel. So they took them. And away from the destruction, away from the death. And she made the difference, not just in her life, but she made a difference in the life of her parents and of her siblings and of her nieces and her nephews. And she made a difference in their life, because by faith, that Hebrews chapter 11, by faith, I want to read that one more time. Let me get back to it. Hebrews chapter 11. By faith, in verse number 31, the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not. See, there was those in Jericho, and they didn't believe in the Lord. They didn't believe in the Lord. She did. By faith, the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace. She made a difference. She had to believe. She heard and believed by faith, just like Lydia, that good woman, that respectable woman. This unrespectable woman had to believe just the same as Lydia. No matter what your life has been, no matter what you have done, the Lord wants to save all of us. He wants to save the good people, and He wants to save the bad people, because we're all sinners. We're all sinners. And we all come short of the glory of God. But by faith, we can receive His free gift of salvation, that He paid the penalty for my sin and for your sin. And my sin was horrible, and my sins continue to be horrible, but the blood has been applied. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again soon.